Welcome to the Bret Boone podcast. I'm Bret Boone, and today I'm joined by if you're a sports fan, you know his voice, you know his face, you know his name. He's one of the top anchors in the history of SportsCenter, ladies and gentlemen, John Anderson. Johnny, thanks for coming on the program.
I appreciate it. Thanks. And it's a very kind intro. I just kind of feel like the guy that does a show every night. And then before you know it, you're there like 25 years and people decide you might know what you're talking about.
SportsCenter. Okay. It's near and dear to a lot of us. Me playing the game for a long time. I loved SportsCenter, especially it came out in 79. How old were you when you saw your first episode?
Oh boy. I was in college, like I'm 58, almost 59. And I tell people all the time, like SportsCenter was not when I went off to college and journalism school. SportsCenter was not at the time a destination. It was young. In fact, SportsCenter wasn't even what we think of it as now. It was just a kind of an hour show that they had there, a half hour, depending on what the day was. And so we used to watch a thing called Timeout for Trivia. I don't know if you remember that. It was Todd Donahoe, who worked for the Dodgers for many years, did it. And he was a Mizzou guy, so we kind of were brand loyal and watched him. So it probably wasn't until I was deep into college, 86-ish, maybe, that I went, oh, there's a place there that, cable was new. It was hard to get. We didn't have any money for cable in college. So, I mean, it had to be the mid 80s or so before I saw it. And then like everybody else, when kind of Dan Patrick Keith Overman made the thing appointment viewing. But by the time that happened, I was in my 20s. I was not one of these kids that grew up on it every morning before we left the house. And I do tell people like that, if that would have been there when I was 8-year-old John Anderson, I would have never made it to school. I'd have just been in front of the TV watching those guys again and again and again.
I can picture it right now. I'm sitting in New Jersey. Cable just came out. We got those buttons that you're pushing.
Yeah.
And it was George Grant who ended up covering me in Cincinnati.
Yep.
Bob Lee, Mees, Gumble, of course, Berman was one of the. Do you look at it now? I mean, you've been there since '99. You've long run.
Yeah.
It's kind of. Tell me if there's a good comparison here. I kind of look at it like SNL. Saturday Night Live back in the glory days where Chevy was there and Bill Murray, and then Chevy left. A lot of guys did that too. They came, they made a big splash, and they left. But I don't know. I always remember the beginning was the first time you're bringing sports highlights to me in a different way than it had ever been done before.
Yeah, and I assume, even though I don't have kind of the big league legacy you have, but I'm assuming you were a kid like I was that ate up the agate page and ate up the box scores.
Yeah.
But they were just, they were black and white type on a newspaper. So when SportsCenter started to see these guys every day, like, oh, wow, that's, there's Reggie Jackson. I could see him, right? That was towards the end, I guess, of Reggie, because he was there. Dave Winfield, guys that I had read about and would see them that were only available to me on NBC's Game of the Week once a week on Saturday. So to see them every night was amazing. And the guys you talk about, the OGs, and let's not forget the General Bob Lee in there.
Yeah.
I always make this comparison. This is the way I kind of look at it. I always say I feel like it's kind of like the space program back with NASA, and that Bob and Tom Mees, who you mentioned, God rest his soul, and Berman and Gumble and George Grant, who, by the way, might be one of the nicest human beings ever.
Ever. Almost like too nice that you got to poke him once in a while. Come on, George.
I just saw him in
it can't be that sunny every day.
I went and saw him, and he was there in an airport, just randomly. And of course, you know who he is. You don't know how he's perpetually tan. That's amazing. But there he is. And I went in to say, just to introduce myself and say, thanks. Like, I have a job because people like you. And by the time I got done, I'm like, why? I think the guy was thanking me for somehow having, like it was just completely reversed. But those guys, I think, were to me, they were like the right stuff. They were like the Mercury astronauts. They went up in the caps when nobody had an idea if it would land. And they were the pioneers. And then Dan and Keith came along, and some of those guys, Rich Eisen and Stewart, and they were the NASA. They were the Apollo astronauts. They landed on the moon. They were the biggest things. They were huge. to everybody. And then people like myself that came along a little bit afterwards, even Van Pelt, John Butchie Gross, guys like that. We were like shuttle astronauts. Like, it's still cool to be an astronaut, and it's really hard to do, but it's just not quite the same as the guys that landed on the moon. We're still up there. We're doing some stuff. It can be dangerous. It's awesome. Every kid wants to still be an astronaut. It wasn't quite as carry the glamour that those guys had in the early years. But I'm with you. I did see all those guys, and I'm lucky enough that I got there to work with some of them. I did a Super Bowl one time with Dan Patrick and several shows, and I worked a show with Keith and Bob Lee. And so I got most of all of them. And my timing is right that most of the guys that were foundational people at SportsCenter and at the network, I have been able to cross paths with.
You went to Mizzou.
Yeah.
When did it become a reality for you? Like, I want to do SportsCenter. Was that something you were thinking about, or was it SportsCenter or just sports in general?
Yeah, it was kind of sports in general. I knew I wanted to go out. And back then, like I said, because of the time of where ESPN was in its days and its involvement, when I first started, like, they didn't get the NFL. It wasn't until they got NFL that they decided now they can be this gigantic, big company. So I thought all the guys I went through school with that were sports guys, the few of us, we were all like, okay, how do we go get a nice job at a big size market and maybe be close to home? So since I grew up in Green Bay, like, how do I get to Milwaukee? How do I get to Detroit? How could I get to Chicago? How could I get to Minneapolis? And that was kind of the focus of what I was trying to do. And of course, naturally, so I went to Oklahoma, because isn't that closer to Wisconsin than any place else? But I went through there, and then when they started ESPN News, and that became a thing that you could see, and they hired those guys. I was watching that, and I thought, well, I can do that. I feel like I have that ability. And so that's when it was. It wasn't until, so what am I? I'm in the early 90s when I think, oh, maybe I can do that. And I don't know if this ever happened to you with other ball players, but you'll go somewhere. I remember the first time I went to New York in a working capacity, and I turn on the TV and I'm like, wow, that's New York. That's the number one media market in the world. And I'm like, that guy's okay. Like, I can do what that guy does. But then you go someplace and you're like in Lubbock, Texas, covering an OU football game, and you watch the local Lubbock guy and you're like, that guy's really good. I hope my news director doesn't see him and he'll want to hire me. Right. So I'm sure you've come across some guy who's been this top prospect, and you go like, I don't know if he's any special. And then you see some guy who's like a 32nd round pick, and you go, holy crap, can that guy play?
Yeah.
And so it's funny how you kind of find your spot in there. And so then when I decided that, yeah, like, I think I could play with that ball club. And by that time I had an agent, and I was working in Phoenix, and we kind of worked towards getting there. And eventually I did.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm interested. Our professions, how they, I don't know. I want to see if there's any similarities to it. Okay, you remember your first day on the set anchoring SportsCenter?
The first one I did was SportsCenter. I do. Yeah, I was with David Lloyd.
And for me, coming up, okay, my life. I go to college. You go to college. You want to be an anchor. You want to be a sportscaster. I went to USC. I want to be a baseball player. That's what I want to do. I go to the minor leagues. I get to the big leagues finally. And now I got to prove myself at this level. I proved myself at every other level.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy, Jay Buhner, for me, was in my early Mariner days. He was a guy that kind of took me under his wing. He gave me a lot of tough love. Believe me, he was a pain in the ass. But I knew where he was coming from. He was going to teach me the ropes, keep me in check. But in the end, he really did take care of me. I'm indebted to this day. When I see Jay, we have a good relationship, but at the same time, I know he helped me when I was coming up. What was the office like? Is it a competitive environment in Bristol? And who, if anybody, took you under their wing?
So yeah, it was competitive at the time. And I don't know that I had anybody in particular, because it's competitive, that took me under their wing per se. The first day I did SportsCenter, I had been on ESPN News for a while, and they just took you at the time. Now they kind of onboard people. They just took you in, and they just threw you in and go. You're on. I arrived on a Monday and or Tuesday, and you were on the next Monday. Here it is. Go. And you go from doing 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes, maybe on a weekend 5, to the first show I was on, I was by myself, and it was from 1 to 4 in the afternoon. 3 hours. I'm like, I don't even know if I know enough words that I can cover 3 hours, and it's like crazy. And so there's some sink and swim mentality in there with a lot of, they're like, you either can play or you're not, and they let you strike out a few times, but then they decide if you can play. And so now you're on ESPN News, and everybody is dying to get on SportsCenter, because even ESPN, when the schedule comes out, you see where the news guys are and you see where the sports guys are. They eventually went to alphabetical because people were like, come on, man, you have to make that caste system on the schedule so we know where we sit. So everybody, and so if there was an opening, somebody would call in sick. It was just how many guys, who could get to the office fastest to take the SportsCenter shift. And so my first one, they called me on my day off, and they said, you want to come in? I'm like, hell yeah. If you say no, like, forget it. You're done. You're burying yourself. And I did it with David Lloyd, who was great. And then I moved up pretty quickly. So in some regards, there were some people that had been there longer, and there was some resentment. But there were more people that were good to me. Kenny Mayne was good to me. Linda Cohn was unbelievable to me. Steve Levy has been unbelievable to me. Yeah, she's got tons of Seattle roots. So in terms of taking care of me or under a wing, not really, but Linda was really good to me. When I started with her, she did more for my career than any, because she sat there and she treated me like an equal. She could have said, who is this guy? Right? Like, who's this guy that has been here 8 months that nobody knows? And I had Kenny Mayne. So she treated me like an equal from day one, which really helped. I benefited from sitting next to her and her credibility. So if there's somebody kind of like that she made my career, although it wasn't more mentor thing. But Dan Patrick was really good one time. He took me aside, and I had been there a while, and he said, hey, I've been watching, and I think you can be good at this. It's okay to die with one in the bank. And he was just like, over the course of an hour, people remember 4 funny things, 4 unique things. They won't remember 14. So don't try to do it all at once.
Right.
Pace yourself out. It's okay to die with one in the bank. If you don't get it in, guess what? They're going to play a whole slate of Major League Baseball games tomorrow. And then the day after that,
you'll get another chance.
You're going to get more. There'll be more ABs, so you don't have to go crazy with it. And so that was really helpful along the way. And that, like, okay. And it turns out, yeah, I've been here 25 years. I have plenty of time to get it all in.
It is amazing to me, when you bring up things. He said, yeah, well, it was competitive. So some guys were kind of resentful. It still floors me to this day. The resent. I remember at the end of my career, and the writing's on the wall. We all know, especially being an athlete, there's Father Time that he's going to win. And I was getting to my end of my tenure in Seattle. And we had this young second baseman coming up, and it was the last thing I was going to do is resent him or I was him one time, and I thought, well, my career might be ending. I might be moving on, but I know it's kind of the writing was on the wall in Seattle. It's the time it had played out. A lot of the guys in my group had moved on, and it was my turn, and I was going to move on. But I had this young kid coming up, and I thought, I want to give him as much knowledge and as much experience. My experience is that I can't help him. I want to. I looked at it the other way. It's not competing. No, it's time to move on. Or even if you're not moving on, let the new guy teach him. Have enough security in yourself to not make it a resentful situation.
Yeah, but the difference I would draw there, Bret, is because I'm kind of in that position now, right? I'm 58. Right. I feel like I'm established, and people that come in, I try to help like crazy.
Right.
But in the case that I came into, especially because ESPN News has started, it's a couple years old. So now there's 10 or 12 of us, all at the same station in life and all at the same place, whether it's myself, Butchie Gross, Dave Feldman, Betsy Ross. I'm trying to think of some of the other gals that I worked with at the time. Cindy Brunson, who you may have crossed with her husband, Steve Berthiaume, as the voice of the Diamondbacks. So we're all there. And instead of having 9 in the lineup card, there's 6. There's 2 at 6 o'clock. There's 2 at 11, 2 seats at 11, and there are 2 seats on the 1 o'clock. So there's only 6 chairs. And so when one of those comes open, now you got 12 people who are like kind. right? The situation you describe is, like you said, you've had your run, you're aging out.
Yeah.
But if you're there at 22 and you come up in spring training and there's 6 guys that are going to play second base or shortstop or can play in the infield, and there's only now it becomes more competitive because holy crap, if I don't get that, I got to go back to ESPN News and work solo from 1 to 4. In your case, you get to go back to AA or AAA, and nobody wants that. So in that regard, that's where that competitiveness came from. There's a lot of people that all think they're the same ability or better than the other guy, and there's only that 1 or 2 chairs that you really got to go after. Now, Linda, could afford to be nice because she was a made guy. Patrick was a made guy. So those people were kind of different. This was just this group of us that all were hungry and wanted to do stuff.
Right. You're talking about You're talking about the veterans.
Yeah, the veterans were great. Veterans
were good. You're talking about peers.
I'm talking about all these guys that were like me.
There's
picture 12 John Andersons. They just have different names going for the same spot. And then there were guys that you passed. There were guys that you passed and they're like, crap, and then they knew that you're going to go to SportsCenter and I'm going to go back, as we like to call it, the box, because it was just in the newsroom, the ESPN news box. And they got to go back in the box for one of those shifts or one of those schedules. So it's a little different in there. But in the end, everybody kind of finds their way. And then everybody learns how to live with that, because you can't just go around being jerks to everybody all the time. You're there every day. And so there were some folks, but it never became really ugly. But there were some folks who were like, wow, and it wasn't just me. Anybody that got more run than the next guy was it could be tough.
For me, I'm reminded every day when I go to the plate how I'm doing. I could look up, I could see my numbers. How do you know how you're doing?
Yeah, it's tough. I find in this business there's 2 kinds of people. There are people that watch tape just relentlessly. They watch your shows and they look at it again and again. And then there are people that don't look at their tape at all. And the national guys like that, Bob Costas to this day, right? He studies himself like he wants to. And Bryant Gumbel never looks at a tape. And I tend to be the guy that doesn't look at the tape because if it's bad, I know it's bad. So I really don't want to go back and look at it again. Right. And if I say, well, that was really good, I don't want to go back and fear that it's not what I remember. So if you do it enough, you feel comfortable in that. If you do it terribly, or if you do something wrong, you have bosses that will call and let you know, hey, that was not what we were looking for. And then every once in a while you get the public that'll call in, but it's just a subjective deal. So you got to have to, because you don't have the numbers, like you say, then you just kind of have to have faith in yourself that how you choose to do the job. And my example is like, I never did it like Stuart Scott, who was unique. I never did it like Kenny Mayne, who was unique, or Linda Cohn, or Dan, who's unique. So you just have to trust that this is how you've chosen to do it. This is your personality. This is how you view journalism or the show. And you just have to have confidence that it's good enough. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people that don't care for it. You're going to have people that think you're great. It's a subjective business. And, you just go about doing it the best you can. And if they offer you another contract, then you go, okay, I must be doing something right. And they haven't taken my chair away. And so you just keep going. But, there are times that people just like, that for whatever reason, they don't, they just like, oh, that guy went to Missouri, I'm not going to like him. Oh, he's from Wisconsin. Well, I love him because I like the Packers. And the guys in the Vikings go, I hate that guy. He seems to like the Packers. So what are you going to do? And then every once in a while you get the people. We had a guy called the Yankee Die Guy. They finally had to stop him. They finally kind of put a kibosh to him. I don't know how they tracked him down. But he would call new people when we started on SportsCenter a bunch. And he was an avid Yankee fan. And so if you said Derek Jeter was hitting 320, because that's like generic, hey, he's hitting 320. And he'd go, actually, he's hitting 320, 6258. He'd round it out, whatever he goes. So really, you round that up. He's batting 321. And if you can't get your stats right, if you don't care enough about your job, then they should take you off. And if they don't take you off, then you should just die. Like, he was awful. But it was kind of rite of passage. Everybody who came through got the Yankee Die Guy who would call you on something. And eventually he kind of got over the top. I think it might have been with Berthium, where they finally said, okay, this guy might be a threat. But you get those people, and you're always happy that the switchboard, when they call and say, is John Anderson available? Go, sure, hang on, let me just punch you through to him, which they did all the time. Yeah. So
What my guys, I remember, and I have good relationships with them to this day. Charlie Steiner is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
Bob Lee, I always loved Bob Lee for some reason.
yeah, the
Who
general.
do you think? And I know it's a tough choice. It's a tough list because there's so much talent through the years that have gone through those gates in Bristol. Um, who are some of the guys you think left the biggest impression that still felt today in SportsCenter?
Oh, I think for sure, Boomer and Bob. Boomer just because he became this larger than life guy because of how he did highlights, how he became kind of almost a cultish figure with people, how he related to ball players or athletes in general, how they if you had a nickname from Berman, right? Like you were legitimized.
Yeah,
It's guys here. Like if the first time you do a Sports Center commercial, like okay, now you believe it. Like I had friends like that. They until I showed up in a Sports Center commercial, they thought maybe I just shammied Berman's car, and then like, oh, he must be legit. But right there was something to Berman conferring a nickname on you. Like, okay, I think I'm a big leaguer now, or
right.
I belong in the NBA. So he did that, and Bob's journalistic integrity is sort of the standard of the place still. Stuart Scott's he's not felt just in ESPN. Stuart Scott, who's boy, he passed away is it 9 years ago in January 4th. He's felt media wide by every um, young African American sportscaster. Like he just made that impression. Linda Cohn made a huge impression. She had to go through so much stuff to be recognized and to build her career as a woman. She really had to go through some stuff and to still be there and persevering after all that. She's made lasting impressions when it came through. Maybe it's just me personally. I think Kenny Mayne has left one because he just was so different from everybody else. How he did the show and the things he did in outside projects were there. I think Scott Van Pelt right now is making a huge impression. It's just a really smart, funny. We're on the edge of gambling that's become legit now within the show, and he's handled that really well. So I think Scotty has done that. Chris Fowler is a guy who's had a huge impact through what he's done with Game Day to start, and now by play by play. Like Chris will be remembered, and these are people I'd make statues for sure. Charlie Steiner with he and Robin Roberts when they did the 6 o'clock, and with Bob, that was a murderer's row that if they sat up there again today, it's the old thing. Could the guy that played in the 60s have played in the 80s and played in the 2000s? Those
Right.
people could play today. So those are some of the folks that really, Dan and Keith then would be kind of, I don't know if they're on the Mount Rushmore. They wouldn't be on the Mount Rushmore because they wouldn't want to be. They would want to make fun of the people who are on the Mount Rushmore. So they would like to be recognized as great talent, but then they would like to be like, no, I would like to make fun of. There's Berman and Stu and Bob Lee and some of those guys. They would love to sit there and make fun of who was on Mount Rushmore. But those guys changed. Those guys literally made SportsCenter appointment television. Dan and Keith.
Yeah, for me, in the minor leagues, and I was in the minor leagues. Oh, I'm trying to think. Got drafted in 1990. SportsCenter was it wasn't new. Like I said, it came out in
Right.
'79, but this was before MLB and the media that we have today, the smartphones. And I'll tell you what, in the minor leagues, that's all I did is okay, finish my game in A ball. I got to take a shower real quick because I got to get home because I got to see
Mhm.
what the big boys are doing. And I'm telling you, it was clockwork. And we lived by that back then. It's
Yeah.
1990, 1991. You're a young aspiring baseball player. Man, you gotta get home and see what's going on, see what the big guys are doing. And that was Sports Center. So it's always been a huge part of my life.
Yeah, it was for everybody. And it has changed now with access to other highlights. People kind of know scores. I mean, you used to literally say, "Hey, coming up, the Mariners are playing the Giants on the West Coast." You could just say, "We'll show you who won," and that was enough for me to go, "Cool, I want to go watch. I want to see who won because I didn't know."
Yeah.
Now we show you that, and we got to give you a little something more to it because people see it, and we need to add another layer so that why you're watching is important. But yeah, I don't know that anybody. My son is 22. He's going through journalism school now. I don't think he'll ever appreciate what you described. How if you were really a sports fan, you just went back to see who was there, who was playing, who, oh my gosh, I want to see Ozzie Smith. I want, because he's gonna make a play that I know I'm not going to be able to believe unless I see it. Just great players like that, Jay Buhner or Ken Griffey Jr. Like you went back right to see what Junior did.
Yep.
Listen, you know him close enough. I'd pay to watch him strike out, just the way he swung the bat. But all those guys, it's hard to explain to them how you just didn't want to miss it. Or, when I worked in Tulsa, which was the AA ball club for the Rangers at the time, all those guys. I usually, if this was reversed, I always ask people, when was the first time you saw yourself on SportsCenter and you did your first highlight?
Oh, that was huge.
Right? Guys remember that. They went back like, holy crap, I made the show.
Right now you could post your own stuff.
Yeah.
You can put it on your own Instagram.
But if you
back
made
then,
it,
it's
holy
like,
crap.
Man, that was a hell of a play I made in the 6th, and it better be on that damn SportsCenter.
Right.
And it's not. You're yelling at the TV. What do I got to do?
These guys know nothing about baseball. How do they know
these
that?
Idiots.
And I remember I can remember playing Babe Ruth baseball, and everyone, they put a little Green Bay, small town. They put a blurb from every game. I played for national merchandising, and I think I had 4 hits one time for the first time in a game, and it was against the Super Value or the firemen's, the local fire department. And I thought for sure my name was going to be in the paper for the write-up, and that they're going to be like, Anderson had 4 hits. And it wasn't there. But that's kind of the same equivalent. Like, okay, I had 4 hits, or I made this great defensive play. I'm like, I'm going to make SportsCenter tonight. I'm totally going to make it.
Right.
And people, guys went and looked for that.
Well, when you would finish recapping the game, okay, and here comes the time if you've arrived. Now, if you're 4 for 4 with 2 3-run homers, you're going to be on the little drop down. But when you went 0 for 2 with 2 walks and your name was, now you're big time. But the times that I wasn't mentioned down below in my Seattle years, I was like, what are they missing? Don't they know I got a knock tonight?
Yeah, you got to get on the bottom line, or you just want to. Yeah, because once you get your names big enough, once you're Shohei Ohtani, it doesn't matter what you do.
Right, you have a bad game, and that's on the bottom line.
People know Ohtani 0 for 4, 2 walks, or 0 for 4, 3 strikeouts. Then you're there all the time.
Green Bay. I know Green Bay's near and dear to you. I know you're a Packer fan. Okay, little scenario here, and you can't pick yourself. Green Bay wins the Super Bowl. You're at home. You're a sports fan. You're kicking back on the couch.
Yeah.
SportsCenter's coming on. Who do you want bringing you the highlights?
So 20-year-old me would want Berman, because that's just screamed to me ESPN in the Super Bowl. And then 30-year-old me wanted Dan and Keith. And now give me either Van Pelt or give me put on Bucci-Gross and Levy, because those are just 2 of my favorite people. I'd say Reese, but he's a college football guy. So Reese is going to be there when Missouri wins its national championship in football.
Love Reese.
Then I'm going to put RD on. Give me either, kind of in the current thing, give me Van Pelt, because he'll find some crazy way to shout it out to me, or just put on Bucci-Gross and Levy, and that's just good television. Like, that's a great SportsCenter no matter what's happening, whether it's the Super Bowl or if they're playing the CONCACAF World Cup semifinals.
By the way, I'm a big Reese fan. I love Reese Davis.
Everybody should. Standard.
How do you put together a show? Tell me what I don't know that goes on behind the scenes.
A lot of really boring stuff. Picture your managers just going over analytics and going over scouting reports, and you're like, wow, he just sits there. You want to come shadow a manager for a day. Would it be that exciting? Right? You don't think it would. I sit there at my desk a lot. I end up going down crazy rabbit holes because all I'm trying to do is find out when the last time that Sam Frelick had 3 hits for the Brewers. and you find out that he was like in Gastonia, and then you're like, well, I think I knew a guy that played in Gastonia, but he played there 10 years ago. And so, you're just going through, but it's a lot of sitting at the desk, and it is a lot of typing, and it is a lot of researching, and it is a lot of blank paper trying to come up with an idea to write something and then hating it and erasing it and starting over. And it's a lot of discussion about, what should be in the show, what's more important. Last night we had the most recent one I did. We were kind of going back and forth. What's more important, or what's more impactful for the viewer, which was Domantas Sabonis, who had 46 straight double-doubles. He could break the franchise record, or that the Kings beat the Bucks for the first time in 8 years because they'd lost 15 in a row. And I kind of, as a Wisconsin guy and a Bucks guy, I'm like, I don't know. They won for the first time in 8 years. Like, that's a long time. And they're like, yeah, but, and I think double-doubles are everyday kind of thing anymore. Guys are more stat-driven. And so you go about, so there are discussions there like that. It is, how do we put the show together? We started with the Bulls. Originally there it was the Bulls something, whoever they were playing. And I'm like, I don't know that we should be doing that. Like, it's just game number 65 in the NBA. I don't know it's that exciting. Show me all these kids that are crazy because they won the SoCon tournament or the NEC tournament and are going to the NCAA tournament, and they go crazy and jump around. So now you flip the show over. So it's just, I'd love to tell people it's awesome and it's exciting, but I feel like it's the equivalent of, the guy sitting on the on that barrel, and he's just flipping you pitches. You're not even taking BP, right? He's just sitting there, soft tossing. You're just like, okay, it's unbelievably important to your craft, right? But it's not going to make anybody feel like it's terribly exciting. And so there's just, it's a lot of writing and it's a lot of research so that when that game gets over, and like the Bucks game did during the show, and you don't have time to look at it, you got to do your work ahead of time, and you're getting all that done. And but I tell people all the time, I have kids coming, can I shadow you for the day? And you're like, yes. And then I get done at the end of the day and I go, how many people did you meet today? And they're like 50. And I'm like, how many were on TV? 2. And so there's so much more prep and stuff that goes in behind it by the time you get on, that it's not terribly exciting. Like, you really build towards that hour of your day that you're on TV, where most people, right? If you're an accountant, I think, I don't want to insult accountants, but like 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock looks the same as 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock in your day. It's the same thing. In our case, and yours, right, your whole day leads up to that game. Like your whole day is for those 3 hours. In my case, that whole day is for that hour or two that we're on. So it kind of built, and it's not always sexy getting there, but then once it's there, it's showtime, and then you really are going, and then suddenly you're done. And it's like, okay, it's 2 a.m. How do I get rid of the adrenaline of doing this show? Because you can't just go home and go right to bed, because you're thinking about all the stuff that's just happened.
I don't think it's far off. I think it's a pretty good parallel. Is, yeah, I get up, my day starts at probably 2 p.m. where I get in the car and I'm headed to the ballpark, and now the maintenance starts. And if I got an injury, I got to work that out. And I got this, and I got press, and I got pregame prep, sign a few autographs, doing whatever you do, eat my pregame meal. Okay, now the anthem's over. Now I'm on. And I can relate to you big time with, you do it for an hour, but then the adrenaline's still there because, that's what we do. And it never went away for me. I mean, it was the same when I was a rookie as it was in my last year. When that game ended, it's like, all right, relax, time to decompress now. And it is, there's something to it. Everything's built up for game time.
And so then constantly, right, you build up for this. In our case, we lay this out. This is what we're going to do. We're going to, the Mariners are on the West Coast. I'm doing the overnight show.
Right.
Okay. So you guys are going to be done late. And it's going to be worse, by the way, when Soto, or Rob Nen of the Giants blows a save, or Luis Soho inside outs one with 2 outs in the fucking 9th inning, excuse my French, and now we're going to extras, and I got to stay up a whole nother hour.
Yeah, you do.
That guy. And so, but you're building for that, and all of a sudden, if you kick one and a highlight doesn't go great, then your day ends and you feel crappy. Right? Like it's one thing if you go there and you have 3 hits and you go home and it's great, but it's another if you go and you build up for this whole day and you strike out 3 times and you're just like, oh, and now, that whole day that you built up and you feel crappy and you got to try to get rid of that feeling, which takes even longer. But yeah, let me just tell you right now, the Mariners, when I came to this ESPN, baseball was my favorite sport by far. Okay. I love the Bucks. I love the Packers. I want them to win championships, but I will be happy when my Brewers finally win a World Series. That's all I really want left in life.
You're in trouble, man. Burns is gone.
You don't have to tell me this. I understand.
I don't. I don't
Woodruff
like
and the whole thing. But
Brett,
this is what I need. So
I don't like. I don't
kid.
like your short-term chances.
I don't either. But I'm a
but
baseball.
You're
kid.
rocking you're rocking the Brew Crew though now.
I do always. Yeah. I grew up listening to Bob Uecker. Like, tell me you have a better soundtrack to your life as a kid than listening to Bob Uecker.
I remember those teams. Harvey's Wallbangers, Cecil Cooper. He was one of my favorites.
All of them. Younton, Jimmy Gantner. We love
Paul Molitor, one of my favorite human beings.
So all these guys. So now I get to ESPN. And I'm still baseball fanatics, but under the old rules of baseball, when I first was there the first 10 years, you couldn't show anything from a game until the game had ended. The only people that could show some in-progress stuff was Baseball Tonight. They had a different license.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, how come you lead with the Yankees and the Red Sox? Well, because they're over. Like, I'd love to start with, hey, pick up Barry Bonds is going great guns. He's hitting home runs. I'd love to show him, but I can't show it till the game's over. So now you're sitting there and you're waiting and you can't go home till all the games are over. And literally, the Mariners are 1 out away. They're going to lose. We're going to be going home. And then Soho, right? There it is inside the first baseline. Fuck. There's 2 bags. We're going to extra innings. And it just, or Rob Nen.
And that's back before the pitch clock. So your night's even longer. Now it's getting easier for you.
Or
it's
Rob Nen. You probably faced Rob Nen.
Oh, yes, I did. Never got a hit off him ever.
So, but Nen, if you remember him, right? He was a great closer, but he was not a 1-2-3, let's go home closer.
Exciting.
He was a, let's go 3-2, we'll strike out a guy. We may walk a guy. Then that guy we never hit into a double play because the guy behind him is fast enough. So we're only going to get the force. Then we're going to walk another guy. And he was like 7 batters to get out of the inning. And you were just like, okay. And as soon as that game missed its slot, they had to wait again till the next hour to put it in. So by the time I got done, people in the West Coast baseball, I'm like, I've had it with you people. And you have ruined my love for baseball. I need everybody to play faster. It's gotten better, but people, the Mariners for sure, because it would be different too if you were a 60-win Mariner team. But that's when you guys were good. So now I had to stay up, right? Like if you guys were playing 400 baseball, then I can bury you to the bottom line. But I can't when you're playing and Griffey's playing and Buhner's playing and A-Rod's playing and Randy Johnson's. I can't do that. I can't bury you now.
So you are a true sports fan. That was one of my questions. It's like, can you do this for a living, be an anchor, have to be on? This is what you do, and then step away from the professional side, put your flannel shirt on and cheer for your favorite team. Obviously you can. For me, I don't know if I'm a fan of sport. I don't know if I'm a fan of anything in particular. Wait a minute. I do. I love golf.
Right.
I can sit and watch a major all day long and everybody around me thinks it's the most boring thing in the world. I just love it because other than baseball, golf was my hobby. I've always loved it. I'm still hacking it along at about a 6 or 7 handicap, but I love the game and I'm fascinated by it. Whereas I love baseball. It's been my whole life. I like finding out what's going on, but it's not like, unless I have a show to do about a particular game, it's not like, I can't wait to watch that game. Right. No, I'll watch it. I love watching the postseason. The best for me, we're going to have Brandel Chambly, the
smart
guy
guy
on the Golf Channel.
Yeah.
He's going to come on the podcast next week. I love shows like that because it's like I can't get enough golf. And tell me about this and tell me that. And Brandel, you know what? When we have a timeout here, my putting grip, it kind of, you got any suggestions?
Right.
Because that's what I love. I go to the football games. I go to SC. I take my dad. I sit on the sidelines and pretend that I'm a fan, but I could really care less who wins the game. So guess long story short, I'm a fan of
Yeah,
sport. John Anderson, you're actually a fan. You love the Brew Crew. You love
yeah.
the
Yeah,
oh
I like it all. Now I'm with you. I learned to love golf. I've always liked it, but I learned to love it. But it's just the opposite of baseball because it's always held in a really beautiful place, and B, it's over when it's dark. I don't have to stay up till 3 a.m. Man, when
right.
we get it dark, we're over. You can go eat and you can go home when you do it. Chambly will be fascinating.
Yeah,
And
oh,
what I've
I
found
can't
more
wait.
and more
Huh?
as I've gotten older and gotten into it, um, like I always think every time Tony La Russa made it sound like he was this genius and he loved to cultivate that. I wanted to go, listen, I've seen enough baseball. I know how to do the double switch. May never have played in the big leagues, but I know how to do the double switch. I get it.
You're on to the managers and how unimportant they really are now.
But I love behind the scenes. I love finding the inner workings. Like I could go watch soft toss because I would love to see guys tweaking what they're doing with their hand position, where they're at, little
Right.
things like that, getting the bat. So as I've gotten older, that's the stuff that fascinates me. I love watching guys on the range at golf tournaments and watch them sit there with here's my little pyramid of balls and they have their 3 iron. And I love watching them hit 5 in the row down the middle. Then I like watching them move it to the right and move it to like that part of it. Granular stuff now fascinates me more than ever is watching that stuff. The big picture to me, here's the guy and, there's a runner on second with less than 2 outs, and we're going to try to move him over because like that stuff's fine, but that to me is sort of first level stuff. I love now getting in and watching guys do that other stuff, right? Like I'd go early when I was in school and just watch Ozzie Smith take infield, right? Like, tell me that's not better than a game than just watching Ozzie Smith
Yeah, no,
and
I
not
agree with
and
you.
watching him throw half the time when he's not looking. He just wants to know where, that when he knows he can stand on the dirt and know exactly where he is and make that throw without looking because I just loved watching that kind of stuff. And that stuff still fascinates me because I think that's what separates really great people from guys that are good. From the 1%ers who are in the big leagues to the 99.9%ers who are all stars.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that fascinate me.
Well, I think, when it comes to like baseball for me, it's what I did. It wasn't a big deal. So
Right.
it was meticulous.
Mm-hmm.
And for a John Anderson, you'd probably come and watch and go, that's really interesting. Why do you do that? That's fascinating to other people. To me, it's just boring. It's what I do every day.
Sure.
I know what I'm doing. As a young when I was in my heyday, I'd go to the golf course and I'd show up 5 minutes before my tee time. I don't need to go to the range. I'm just ripping it off the first tee, and you're going to give me a breakfast ball. You're going to give me a breakfast ball, and I'm going to go on from that. Now I'm with you. Like I'm watching how the great players how they warm up on the putting green, and I've had trouble in the
Mm-hmm.
last year putting. So now I've got those two tees I'm putting. My putter barely
Yeah.
fits, and I'm doing little things like that. Your profession, you've been doing this your whole life. I'm doing this podcast now, and it's like, wow, I've done a million interviews, and I'm a great interview, and I can bullshit with the best of them.
Right.
But for the first time, they told me, no, Brett, you've got to interview other people. And I'm going, I've never done that before. I've never set up an interview. How do I prepare? So now I'm really fascinated what you've been doing your whole life. And me thinking as an athlete, when John Anderson comes and asks me a question, oh, shit. Okay, John, what do you need? Now I'm kind of like, wow, there's more
Yeah.
to it than we just see on SportsCenter for an hour. There's a craft, there's a professionalism, and there's a lot more work than I thought there was. I'm learning to really appreciate your side of the microphone that I think when we're athletes, we're young, we don't understand really what goes on the other side, and there's more to it than just showing up.
I appreciate that the way you say that because I think there is. I think people all think that they can coach an NFL team, and I think they all think they can anchor a sportscast.
Yeah.
Um, which I don't know. Maybe both those things are true. I don't know. My favorite is just to put somebody on the desk and see that red light come on
Go
and
get
watch
them. Yeah, go
fear
get. And you talk
fear and
about
terror.
you
You
talk
know,
about the 3 hours of content where you go,
yeah.
all right, I don't know if I can talk for an hour. I got 3 hours, and now I got to listen to myself for 3 hours. And it was really cool the first time I said
Mhm.
it, but I'm hearing myself say it for the fourth time.
Right.
And is everybody else hearing that?
Yeah.
In the little games we play mentally, how we come across.
Yeah,
It's
and
amazing.
you do that, and like the hardest part of television, I think, in terms of people think about being nervous or getting on there, is people are afraid to speak in front of crowds, but you can kind of get used to talking in front of an audience. It's talking when there's nobody there. Like here's a camera, there's one dude behind it, but he's seen like 3 SportsCenter, so he's turned around, he's texting somebody. So now you're trying to act like you're interested and make people interested, and nobody in this, there's just nobody in there, and the 2 people that it might be in there are completely uninterested. And that's a quirkier feeling to what happens. But in our case too, I think, at least in mine, I like to think that I've got some that I work hard at it. So where guys take extra infield or they're work, like I'm just like, what's the right word? Like I have to make sure that I have the right word. And people always think, well, you're responsible for what you say. And you totally are. That's the first level. But you're also responsible for what people hear. And like you talk about USC, and when they went through a series of like 9 embarrassing events, I got on, I had Danny Cannell, and I said, this is USC. Like this is a blue-blooded program. This is as storied of a program as you can ever have. National championship, Heisman winners. And right now, they are like they're in danger of becoming a clown college. And all people heard was Anderson says USC is a clown college.
Yeah.
They didn't hear any of the buildup, which is fine. That's on me. It's the same thing. You're responsible for what people hear. And so I did this, which kind of was a trigger word, and that's what people heard, and they didn't hear the rest. So I tell young journalists when I'm talking about it, so you want to speak so that you can be understood. It's more important to speak so you can't be misunderstood. And I've run into some of those places, right? The USC was a prime example. And by the way, your people, they were vocal. They came out. They let me know. My email was not hard to find. Some people were very nice. I wrote almost all of them back, as long as they were not just vulgar. And most people then were calmed down by that. The reasoning, and I'm like, because I was like, I loved SC as a kid. I've been able to do the Rose Bowl Hall of Fame inductions for about the last 5 or 6 years. And so I got to meet Anthony Davis, which you talk about what early memories of things you saw on TV was him destroying USC when I was probably 7 years old. Like that just never left me, watching him returning a kickoff to start the second half. And, so the great Trojans that came through there, Charles White and when he played, and all these tailbacks, like even a kid in Green Bay, because there wasn't a billion college football games on. Right now they're on Wednesday and Friday and Saturday and all day long. You got 1 or 2 every Saturday. Well, 2 you always got were Notre Dame, USC, and you got UCLA, USC. You always got those 2 games. And so I think I knew and saw more USC guys play or Notre Dame guys play than I ever did University of Wisconsin, which was just down the road. I had to listen to them on the radio because they never made television. But to your point of the craft or learning, like there are just pitfalls in there that you got to be careful of. Because every time you open your mouth is a chance to embarrass yourself when it comes through.
And it's amazing to me how many people are willing to look for your email because it's that important to them. If something was taken out of context, and probably when they did their research, they found out it was taken out of context, but I'm still going to let John know because I just have to be. I question people like that. Anyway, all right. I got to get to this. This was a favorite of mine. Wipeout. I love it. I love it. And speaking of clowns, you got clowns get knocked out by props. Henson was on there. You do hot dog eating contests. You talk about you're going to cover the marathon. Okay. How do you go from SportsCenter to Wipeout? How does that come to fruition?
Yeah, that you want to talk about clowns. Yeah, I found out later when they did the 24 people, that's the contestants, that when they cast the show, they wanted 8 people who they thought could win. Like here are 8 people that look like they might be athletic. They look like they could win. And they wanted 8 people who were like the everyman. Here's a housewife. Here's a mechanic. And then they wanted 8 people that were just clowns, that were just goofballs. And they thought that was the magic potion of what happened. And what we found more often, by the way, is that the housewives and the mechanics won, because the guys that were the athletes or the gals that thought they were like, they realized quickly it wasn't a hugely athletic endeavor, and that you were being embarrassed. And most of those people were like, okay, then, so they'd start to jake it because they didn't want to look like, their athletic ability was being compromised. And you'd get the housewife and she's like, listen, I got 3 kids. They threw up on me this morning. This falling in the mud is not going to deter me at all. And then they'd go through. So, and I got the job. It was just crazy. They sent out these people that were putting it together. The guy who was the head of the company was a very big sports fan. So they knew they wanted a sports announcer type. And they sent some feelers to myself. I think they sent one to Kenny. I know they sent one to Scott Van Pelt, and they sent one to Matt Weiner at our place. And Matt's now doing great NBA stuff at TNT and does baseball postseason. And we all were like, I don't think you realize what we do. And like, that's not us. And we all kind of said no. And the guy called me back specifically. I don't know why. And he tried to explain it more. And he said, and I said, I don't know that this is what I want to do. Like, I don't think I'm not like an actor. I don't do that. And I'm worried about what should be, like compromising what in sports. The guy said, hey, did you ever watch Battle of the Network Stars when you were a kid? I'm like, I did. He goes, you think people thought less of Howard Cosell because he talked to Suzanne Summers in a bikini? And I, maybe not. So then I just kind of pursued it, and they brought me out for a screen test or a pilot. We shot the pilot. And I can remember the guy who was the actual in charge of the show, the producer, not the money guy. And he had said, I watched your tape. I think you do all right. You're polished. I just don't know you're that funny. And I said, well, I get that. But I don't know that I'm licensed to make, it was right in the middle of the Michael Vick dog thing. Like, I'm not sure I'm licensed to make jokes on air about Michael Vick and dog fighting. Like, there's a lot of jokes to be made. I just don't know that I can do them. And I said to him, but the other spot here is you want this comedian. You've got a spot in here. We're going to have a comedian. That was how it was cast. Literally, sportscaster, comedian, and then it was hot sideline girl. That was literally the description. And I said, but if you got a comedian, how funny do I have to be? And I think that might have gotten me the job. But he thought, okay, this guy's not going to try to be super funny. But I'll cut it short. So I go out, I do the pilot, and ABC picks up the show for 8 episodes. And they call me, and the guy says, hey, the show's picked up, ABC, we can't wait, we want you to do it, but we're going to replace the comedian. So the immediate, and
2 hot chicks.
And we're going to bring in John Henson. The guy I did it with is out. And so I got off the phone, hung up, told my wife, I said, wow, this is crazy. I'm going to have to negotiate a deal. First I'm going to have to tell my agent who I'd done this kind of just without his knowledge. But I always thought it was really funny. The guy said, I'm not very funny. I kept the job, and they fired the guy who was supposed to be funny and brought in a new guy. And from there, it was just great. We just lucked out. It was the right thing that people wanted to see at the right time. And I had the right partner in John Henson, who still makes me laugh every time he texts me about the Knicks or anything. And and so I just kind of fell into it. And then when it was over, it was good. And I've had a couple other people like, would you be interested in this? And I'm like, no, that's not what I do. It was just a lucky one-off. And those people that did it were crazy. Like, I don't know why anybody would want to do that.
I loved watching the show. I was like really a fan of the show. I would watch it. You've done the hot dog eating contest with Joey Chestnut. SportsCenter is something, it's official, and but these other things, how do you prepare for those? How do you prepare for a hot dog eating contest? How do you prepare for, I'm really fascinated about how you prepare for covering a marathon. Like, what's the chatter in between? I'm interested though. How did you prepare for Wipeout? What was your research and your prep?
Yeah. Wipeout was different, right? Wipeout, I always tell people, like, it's crazy that if you do SportsCenter, there's preparation, but the show itself is 1 hour, and it takes 1 hour. You go on, and then after the hour, we've shown Bret Boone and his 3 hits.
You better have shown that.
We've shown the 3 hits. We have shown Aaron Boone that he has hit a home run against the Red Sox and made all of New England pissed off. And then the show ends at 1 hour, and you go home. And I learned quickly in television and Hollywood and those guys, like you do it and you do a take and they go, that was perfect. Awesome. That's what we want. Now try this. I'm like, maybe you guys don't know. We have a different opinion of what perfect is. Cause I feel like if it's good and it's perfect, then we should be done and we should move on. And you try again. So that was different. They, they'd send, they call it unscripted, but they'd send you a very heavy outline that nearly was kind of a script. And then John and I would go through and change and write and make things sound like our voice, or if things got repetitive, or there'd be some sort of baseball obstacle and they'd go, and here he is running down the foul line. I'm like, okay, well, that's the first baseline and there is no second baseline. So we're not going to write, I'd go change some of those things that they were desperately trying to do that, but you're like, that's not the right terminology. The hot dog eating contest, you would be stunned. Like there's a media guide on competitive eating, who's eating the most pierogies and who's eating the most ice cream and all these other stuff. But most of that, you just go and you talk to the people. It's like anything, right? Like I can read the stat sheet, but if it says you're batting 250, or we're going to do better. You're batting 300. But you know what? You might be on a heater where the last 2 weeks you've hit 410, or it might be the opposite, like the old Willie Mays, right? The average slump is like the average cold. It works out for 2 weeks, no matter what you're doing. So now everybody hitting 210. So I can learn a lot more just by talking to you. How are you feeling? What are you doing? What's good right now? Why are you having this success, or where do you think you're scuffling? Like I can learn more than that than just telling people, hey, look, he's batting 300. And so you go find Joey Chestnut and you just chat with him and some of these other people. And what you find is they're not what you think they are, in terms of like, they're just not these gluttonous people, or how they prepare is fascinating. And so then you try to bring that amongst the actual grotesqueness of them eating it. So you have enough stats on hand to know how many he's eaten, how many he's won in a row, what kind of money he's going to make, how they make the hot dogs. But more, it's just about who's the person that's eating it. And the marathon's a little bit the same way. You just figure the hardest part of the marathon is you do all this prep and 80% of it ends up on the floor. Because you do all this stuff on this, I don't know, here's a guy from Kenya and he's going to be in the running, and here's Galen Rupp, the top American, and you're set for these guys. And they get up and you realize he's got a calf strain, and in 10 miles, he's gone. And you're like, okay, here's all this stuff out. And because it comes down to 2 or 3 guys at the end. And so, you prepare for all of them like they're going to win. And then so much of it just ends up on the floor because they don't, or on that day, the other guy's faster. Whereas at least if you go to a baseball game or you go to an NBA game, that starting five is going to all play 35 minutes. Or, so you're going to get to see them. It's more of a crapshoot on that other stuff. But you just dig in. I got Boston coming up in a month, and I have the master list of people, and I'm going to find out, where they've run most recently. Going to see when the Kenyan Olympic trials are, and see if that affects who's running or how they're running. There's all kinds of stuff that you just, you try not to let anything. You try not to have any surprises. It's the old chance favors the prepared man. And so I feel like if I have way more stuff than I know, then I've got a pretty good chance. And then my family has to suffer, because if it doesn't make the broadcast, now I'm like, did you know that Eliud Kipchoge, he did this, this, and this? And they're like, Dad, we don't need any more on Scott Fauble and the Northern Arizona Elite. Because you hate to let it go to waste. So somebody's going to hear it. Now that I know it, somebody's going to hear it.
And it's great when you say, Bret, I had to change. Hollywood would give me the script, and it just doesn't sound right. There's no second baseline. Isn't it amazing how much? Because that's a pet peeve. It drives me crazy when they don't know the verbiage. Somebody's interviewing me about the game, and they just like, well, isn't it interesting how he throws so fast? No, he's got a good heater, and please don't say that to me again. It's amazing.
Right. But I always think if you watch local news is my favorite. And I worked in local news, and I loved local news, both when I was in Phoenix and when I was in Tulsa. But spring training comes to Phoenix, and all these teams descend upon it. And so now there's stories to be done with tourism and economic impact, and maybe there's building a new stadium in Mesa that no, where'd they build the one that the Mariners and was it the Padres up
Peoria.
in Peoria where they did that. And so there's all kinds of stories. So now it's in the hand of the news people who just don't talk like we talk or know the thing. And so so they'll write the story and boy, did a news person write that story about about sports, because you can just tell how it just sounds tinny to the ear or completely wrong. Like, here's the second, they went right down the second baseline, and you're just like, oh, please.
Well, it's just like in Hollywood.
We're gonna help you out.
In Hollywood, baseball movie, what are they going to do? Oh, well, the director says, well, put tobacco in everybody's mouth because that's what they do.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, he doesn't get it. But it's also Hollywood, and it's for the masses, and everybody's not critiquing it like we are in our profession. So, I get it. I got to take a breath sometimes. Anyway.
Right. I'm willing to give some people a pass. I think those are opportunities to inform.
That's
and those are, we can
better myself.
We
better,
can be
a better human being in the process.
Right.
Yes.
We can make other people better with it as well.
Well, Johnny, I appreciate you taking time out today. This was a lot of fun. I've been a big fan. Will continue to be a big fan. I think you're great, and it's fascinating to see the odd jobs, and what really is behind that. I think it's cool. So that was great. For those of you out there listening to the Boone podcast, watching the Boone podcast on YouTube, I appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, hey, we'll see you next time. Take care.